What happens when you get sick? You sneeze, you cough, you might get a little achy, but why? What's going on inside of your body, and what makes you feel better? Today, we're going to look at the immune system. The immune system is associated with the lymphatic system, a series of ducts that carry lymph or excess tissue fluid throughout the body. These lymph capillaries are much more permeable than blood vessels, and also the flow is a lot slower. Lymph is a collection of proteins, cell debris, and sometimes can contain pathogens. These lymph capillaries congregate in areas called lymph nodes, which can be found all across the body. You might be familiar with the ones that sit right underneath your ear. Sometimes when you're sick, they can feel tender and swollen. Lymph nodes function by filtering pathogens out of the lymph. There's also a collection of macrophages and lymphocytes here to help destroy pathogens before they enter our bloodstream. The reason why your lymph nodes sometimes feel swollen is because of the excess fluid and also cell buildup due to pathogens. Other organs of the lymphatic system include our spleen, which helps filter and store blood, the thymus, a gland associated with the endocrine system that makes lymphocytes, our tonsils, Peyer's patches, appendix, and any mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue. All of these tissues help to try and trap pathogens before they enter our bloodstream. Sometimes bacteria and other pathogens can get stuck in these places, like, for example, the appendix, which can cause inflammation, pain, and could even cause rupturing. Before we get into how the immune system functions, you first have to know what a pathogen is. A pathogen is anything that can cause disease in the body as a foreign particle. The major categories of pathogens are virus, bacteria, parasitic worm, fungi, and protists. Virus and bacteria are often confused, although they are very different from each other. Viruses, like what causes influenza or the seasonal flu, are tiny, non-living particles that hijack human cells to reproduce. They embed themselves into our cells and take over our DNA. Bacteria, on the other hand, are truly living unicellular organisms that are much larger than viruses. They can reproduce on their own and don't have to invade our cells. Bad bacteria can destroy our cells in order to make more room for theirs, and they also release toxins to disable our cells. Bacterial infections include strep throat, urinary tract infections, and food poisoning from salmonella. If you've ever heard of the term antibiotic before, this type of medicine destroys bacteria. Antibiotics cannot function against viruses, since viruses invade our cells and can be undetected by these antibiotics. Not all bacteria in the world are considered harmful. For example, all the time we have tiny bacteria that live on our skin and our gut constantly. Taking antibiotics destroys both good and bad bacteria, which is why sometimes people get upset stomachs when taking antibiotics. Other types of pathogens include parasitic worms, fungi, and protists. Examples of diseases caused by these include tapeworm, athlete's foot, and malaria, respectively. All pathogens have to enter our body through some sort of opening. Our skin serves as a really strong barrier against pathogens, but openings in the skin are where pathogens can enter. For example, we can swallow contaminated food, breathe pathogens in our nose, or cause an opening when we cut our skin. All of these are places that are susceptible to pathogens, which is why, for example, the upper respiratory system is more likely to be infected by a pathogen than, say, our brains, since our nose and throat are directly in contact with the outside environment, which is where pathogens are. We can contract pathogens either through direct contact, such as being transferred through bodily fluids or the placenta in pregnant women, or indirectly, meaning through airborne particles, vectors such as mosquitoes or other bugs, or vehicular-borne, meaning touching contaminated objects. Now that we know how to get pathogens, let's talk about how our body helps stop them. We can break our body's defenses into 3 lines: the first, second, and third line of defense. The first and second line of defense are considered innate or non-specific, meaning everyone in the world is born with these things, and the immune system doesn't really care about what specific pathogen they are. They just try to fight all pathogens. The third line of defense, however, is considered specific or adaptive. This means that your body responds to very specific pathogens, and depending on your DNA, it can respond to it. Our first line of defense can be seen like a giant wall around a castle. The first line of defense includes our skin, mucous membranes, and acidic secretions of our skin and other membranes like our stomach. The first line of defense tries to kill pathogens before they can even get inside of our bodies. For example, our stomach secretes acid to try to kill pathogens we might ingest. Our nose has hairs and mucus to help trap pathogens. I like to consider these physical barriers. The second line of defense can be seen like the guards of a castle. Once the pathogen can get past our walls, or the first line of defense, our body can sense what's called antigens on pathogens. There's a lot of gen words here. An antigen is basically like a flag that sits on every cell. We have our own self-antigens which match our own cells, and our cells know that these are not a foreign body. Pathogens, however, have different antigens on the outside of them, telling our body that this is a foreign invader. These antigens are reasons why people can have problems with organ transplants, as other people's organs may be seen as foreign invaders, even if they don't pose any threat to you. Once the antigen is recognized as foreign, certain cells called natural killer cells can ingest and destroy non-specific pathogens. Other phagocytes such as neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, and mast cells are also triggered in the second line of defense to try to stop these pathogens. The inflammatory response also is triggered by this antigen recognition. The inflammatory response causes heat, redness, swelling, and pain due to histamine and kinin accumulation. Inflammation helps prevent the infection from spreading, and the increased heat can increase metabolism of our cells to destroy the pathogens as well. If you've ever taken an antihistamine when you have allergies, your body unfortunately thinks harmless things like pollen or dog hair is a pathogen and triggers this response. It can be really annoying, but it also can be helpful when pathogens are actually present. A fever is also part of the second line of defense. Fever is a widespread increased body temperature due to pyrogens accumulating in the body. Fevers are actually really helpful because it can cause bacteria and viruses to denature in high heat. Additionally, certain elements like zinc and iron can't be made, which are important for pathogen growth. Now, if the first two lines of defense fail to destroy the pathogen, it's time to bring on the big guns. Our third line of defense, which is considered adaptive or specific, responds to very specific pathogens and can even remember them in the future. You can actually never get sick with the same pathogen twice, although pathogens tend to mutate very quickly and can cause some confusion in our immune system. Our third line of defense recognizes very specific antigens on pathogens. The third line of defense can also be split into two categories: humoral or antibody-mediated or cell-mediated immunity. Cell-mediated immunity uses T lymphocytes. T lymphocytes get their names from where they mature, which is in the thymus. T lymphocytes, or T cells, are a little bit different than B cells because T cells need what's called APCs, or antigen-presenting cells. APCs are dendritic cells that engulf the pathogen and present fragments of the pathogen, signaling T cells to the infected area. B cells do not need or use APCs. Humoral immunity uses B lymphocytes, or B cells, which produce antibodies, or immunoglobulins. B cells get their name from where they mature, which is in the bone marrow. Antibodies are structures that help neutralize, agglutinize, and otherwise destroy pathogens. Once T cells are activated, they can differentiate into 4 different types of cells depending on what is needed. CD8 cells, or killer T cells, destroy the harmful cells. Helper T cells can trigger B cells as well as more T cells. Regulatory or suppressor T cells suppress the immune response once the pathogen can be destroyed. People with autoimmune diseases sometimes have problems with these types of T cells. B cells can differentiate as well. Once the immune response is triggered, B cells either become plasma cells, which make more antibodies, or memory B cells. T cells also have memory cells as well. Once a pathogen has been neutralized, memory B and T cells help to remember the specific antigens for next time. Let's look at how this could be helpful. See how much more antibodies were created in a short amount of time the second time this person was exposed to the pathogen? When the body is able to remember the pathogen, the body doesn't feel the symptoms of being sick, although the pathogen is present. You won't even know that you had the pathogen in your body because it's able to remember and fight it off before it can accumulate and cause you to feel sick. Now, your memory cells are what cause you to have immunity, or the ability for you to resist a particular infection. There are two different ways to acquire immunity, actively or passively. Active immunity means you are actively exposed to the pathogen, and this can happen in two ways. You get the real living pathogen and probably get really sick, or you are given an injection of a killed, attenuated, or portion of the pathogen so your body won't ever have to get sick. But you still have the memory response. This is how vaccines work. There are different types of vaccines for different pathogens, but we're moving towards genetically engineering our vaccines, so just a portion of the DNA has to be inserted inside of you for your body's immune system to be triggered. Vaccines make it so you wouldn't need to get the chickenpox to be immune to the chickenpox. And vaccines have potentially saved millions of lives from very deadly viruses or bacterial infections. Passive immunity, on the other hand, means you are given antibodies from somebody else that can temporarily fight off a pathogen. This can happen either through breast milk or the placenta of a mother to child, or through some sort of donation. An example of antibody donation is when a person receives antivenom for a snake bite, which is another animal's antibodies that can neutralize the venom. Passive immunity is short-term, meaning it doesn't last forever. Active immunity, however, can last a lifetime. Our immune system keeps us safe from millions of pathogens that surround us on a daily basis. Next time you sneeze, thank your immune system for trying to clear out any pathogens from your nose.